So I've used some of these ideas to kind of kick some of the conversations off about the University of Detroit Mercy's history. And we're a 142-year-old institution, started in 1877. So 15th oldest of the 27 now Jesuit universities. Always been in the city of Detroit. We have 3 campuses, a dental school and a law school. And then the area where the main campus is, the McNichols campus, is right in the heart of Northwest DC. So some of those stories you hear about Detroit's coming back is really true. I mean, we have a long ways to go, as is the case of many cities, but there are some things that we're doing in the neighborhoods that now are being used as demonstration projects for perhaps other areas of the city of Detroit. When I got to the university in 2011, they were completing a study called the Detroit Future City Study, and there's a link that's on here. It's a very, very large report, but got to get the cities right. So if you take the footprint of Detroit, you can put Manhattan, Boston, and I think it's Denver, all in the same footprint, and still have a lot of room left. So at that time, when Detroit was at its heyday, there were almost 2 million residents around 1952, 1953. Compared today, where it's about 700,000 residents just in the city proper. Many people moved out to the suburbs, and so there's a lot of spread in the suburban area. But as somebody mentioned earlier, or I think sometime today or over in conversation, we're all facing the challenge of a declining numbers of 17 and 18-year-olds in the state of Michigan, as in Pennsylvania and lots of other Midwestern cities. And so high schools are being consolidated in some of the suburban areas. It's really making it very, very challenging in some of those communities. So I'm just going to hit on a few of these things. And I always begin with this little history about St. Ignatius and his establishment of the Roman College back in 1551. And the focus then was on orphans, the sick, and others, and examples of how and why they were placed in urban locations. And that was one of the real important locations for St. Ignatius. So when I started giving someone an idea of where some of the other Jesuit universities are, as I'm sure you probably have that, and we start talking about St. Louis University and Loyola Chicago and Loyola Baltimore, and you say Gonzaga? Oh, that's a Jesuit university. So when we start running through the names of the cities and where they're located, people say, "Oh, I didn't know that those were Jesuit universities." But our locations really tell a good deal about who we are. We try to get out of the middle here. So this is something that's pretty true to most of us, that we have large numbers of first-generation college students. We all make a very significant impact on our communities and our regions, and we provide the expertise of everybody in this room, on the faculty, staff, as well as our students, alumni as well. So this is just quickly Detroit Mercy's history. So the Bishop of Detroit asked the Jesuits if they would start a school for the education of youth, and that goes back to 1877. In 1941, the Religious Sisters of Mercy also started a school called Mercy College. It started off with Mercy High School in 1941. Of the Mercy institutions, there are 16 Mercy institutions today. So when you look at our 27 Jesuit universities and the 16 Mercy institutions, that's a pretty large number. There really is no other religious group of institutions of the 220 Catholic colleges that even competes with those two numbers. So that's a pretty large number. 1990 is when the two institutions consolidated, and I always use that word consolidated and not merged, because I will probably start a fight, not among the Sisters of Mercy or the Jesuits, but that was a decision to come together. And Sister Maureen Fay, who was the first president of Detroit Mercy and was the president of Mercy College, has told me that when she and Father Mitchell, Robert Mitchell, who was the president of the University of Detroit, decided to bring the boards together and to talk about consolidating, she said, we did it because we knew that we were competing against one another, but that we could be a stronger institution if we became one. Obviously, a lot of the University of Detroit graduates didn't like that. They still tell me that every other day. Some of the Mercy College alumni tell me the same thing. But the fact of the matter that we are still existing after 30 years, nearly 30 years, really says a lot. You've probably read the stories about Marygrove College closing. First the undergraduate programs 2 years ago, and now the graduate programs. So half a mile away from the university, literally 6 blocks, less than 6 blocks. Another case of an institution that was also invited to those conversations back in the late 80s, and they felt that they were doing fine on their own, and when they started experiencing problems the last 3 to 5 years, it really was too late. So the decision of the Jesuits and the Sisters of Mercy was something that thus far has worked. And when John Stoudemire talked about my bringing Rick Lagan to talk to the board, try to say, here are real best practices for board governance, hint, hint. I also asked my friend Kathleen Santora, who is the president of the National Association of College and University Attorneys, to also speak with them, as well as the following year, the president of the National Association of College and University Business Officers, John Walder, on whose board I sat on. So they got 3 national perspectives of what's going on in higher education. And 3 years later, after considerable work with the board, we changed and updated our bylaws for the first time in over 24 years. So we now have new bylaws that had some starts and stops for changing between 1990 and 2000 and 2004, but when you can change your bylaws, that's a sign that both parties, particularly the Jesuits and the Sisters of Mercy and the board, are all in agreement that it's working. So we still have work to do, but that's one of the reasons why I put that slide up. So we're about 5,100 students, and Debbie is responsible for that. She's going to bring in 7,000 next year. Debbie's done a great job with our enrollment. Our enrollment was going in the opposite direction in 2011 and 2012, and the last 4 years we have had consecutive increases in our freshman class. And a lot of that has been due to our engagement with the some 25 or so Catholic high schools in the area, as well as many of the other public schools, because until 1967, the year of the riots, Catholic schools were in the city of Detroit. The only 3 Catholic high schools remaining in the city of Detroit are 2 run by the Jesuits, the University of Detroit Jesuit, and Loyola Academy, which was started in 1993, and a Cristo Rey School. Those are the only Catholic high schools that are in the city of Detroit, and there are only 4 Catholic elementary schools in this day. So everybody, for the most part, fled after the riots, and the alumni who criticized the University of Detroit Jesuit for staying are now slightly apologizing and said, you all knew what you were doing by keeping the high school, because University of Detroit Jesuit is the largest Catholic high school in the metropolitan area of Detroit. So it was a good decision that many people have realized after the fact. We have 7 schools and colleges, and you see them there, and more than 100 academic degree programs. Our students by ethnicity, we like to have a larger ethnicity for our students, and we're working on that. A lot of schools within the city of Detroit are either charter schools or have become students have moved out and taken classes at other schools outside of the city of Detroit. But something that we're working on, and like most institutions, almost all of our students are receiving financial aid. Probably. This is something which I did when I was at Gannon. I think it's very important for all of our city leaders and our business community folks to know the contributions that the university makes, not just on an economic impact, but also of all the services that we provide to individuals within the community, from the dental clinics to law to things in the health professions, the psychology clinics, et cetera, et cetera. It's an opportunity to really showcase that. But I can't click on that link, but if you click on that link, you get the actual brochure. It's just a 4-page brochure that has a lot of the details. So our next document will be going out to many of the business leaders in the city, and but it's important to emphasize those things. So I'm going to hit this real high. A lot of stuff was going on when I got to Detroit. I never worried about Detroit having any more problems than any other city, but I didn't know that they would file for bankruptcy, municipal bankruptcy, within 2 years. I told you about the Detroit Future City study that was going on and had all of this money being pumped in by foundations in order to support this, but it became really very, very important when the bankruptcy issue happened in November of 2014. When I got to the place, it didn't look anything like it looks today. I've got pictures. You know, I was living downtown. My wife and I, you'd come off the Lodge Freeway from the Detroiters right onto Livernois, get about 4 or 5 blocks down to the campus. But the site that I would get would also be the site that prospective students, alumni, parents would get. So, you know, you need to go to work and start getting some allies. Mayor Bing was the mayor at the time, had been on the university's advisory board with Sister Maureen Fay, was very, very helpful for some of the things that we need. So this is a picture that's what it looked like across the street from the campus. It was a Burger King that closed, not because I was coming, but they did tell me that it would close, I think, about a month before I arrived. But that eyesore was one that I could not get the Burger King Corporation to clean up, you know, at any time. We had, you know, just a lot of light poles, as was typical of the city of Detroit at that time, that, you know, was just rusted and overgrown with weeds, and many of the lights didn't work as well, too. So not a very, very pretty picture. But that began the conversation with local leaders and also people whom I felt could be very helpful. So we had a streetscape enhancement plan through getting a grant of about $1 million from the Michigan Department of Transportation and working along with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. So providing funds to be able to do something like this, even though this really is much more of a city initiative, was very, very helpful, at least to get things started. And at the same time, my biggest ally, even to this day, is the Kresge Foundation. My first day on the job was June 1, 2011. There's an annual conference called the Mackinac Policy Conference that occurs right around that time. And one of the first persons I met was Rip Rapson, who's the president of the Kresge Foundation, but who's also from Minneapolis. And I went to graduate school at the University of Minnesota. So, you know, you use your connections when you can, and told him a little bit about that. He knew some friends of mine in the Twin Cities. And he said, you know, when you get settled, let's have a conversation. And my conversation with him was, I'd love to have the foundation assist us in making some efforts to make some changes within the neighborhood. And, you know, 8 years later, probably some $6 million or more has been pumped into our economic development organization, and a lot of things that have happened around the neighborhood of our McNichols campus. So you don't always expect to have that kind of assistance, but sometimes, you know, the person who is sitting in the seat might be very helpful to you. He just did our commencement this past May. But more importantly, Rip Rapson is the son of a well-known architect, Richard Rapson, who was the dean of the School of Architecture at the University of Minnesota for 30 years, and in his own right was just a well-known urban planner. Rip, I will often say, thinks like an urban planner, even though he has a law degree and a business degree, and knows how to really envision things. And many of those changes that you hear that's going on around Detroit, while Dan Gilbert gets a lot of appropriate credit for it, there are a lot of things that the Kresge Foundation has supported behind the scenes, including the light rail system that is still being funded by the Kresge Foundation, a lot of other initiatives in the Midtown area of Detroit. Much of that money they really put out there themselves in order to make sure that those things happen, and a lot of the neighborhood improvement work. So the old on the right-hand side and the new. That's what it looks like if you came down Livernois Avenue. And so these things were very, very helpful in us being able to get some things done. We have the School of Architecture at the university, and the Detroit Collaborative Design Center is a nonprofit entity within the School of Architecture that's been receiving monies from the Kresge Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, a number of other ones, the Knight Foundation, and they were among the ones who supported this study, the Detroit Future City Study. It is an 800-page study, has lots of visuals. It's really a way of envisioning what Detroit would look like if you take away all of those vacant lands, all those dilapidated homes. But it was the students and the faculty who did the civic engagement study and interviewed some 160,000 residents in groups and individuals as they approached them and said, what would you like to see in a new Detroit, or what would you like to see in your neighborhood? This study is really being used by lots of other cities and communities, and many foundations are supporting very similar work, whether it's New Orleans or Memphis or Akron, Ohio, many cities, Oakland, places that the Kresge Foundation and others are supporting to this day. So what the DCDC does is it helps nonprofits to maybe reshape their space. They can do architectural design work for no cost, because the funds that they receive from the Ford Foundation, the Kresge Foundation, and others is really who pays for that work. And so with over 30 years of work, close to 30 years, it continues to be a major force in the city, and it's one of those organizations that has linked itself with these other foundations. And then about 4 years ago, we started Live 6 Alliance. I'm really doing a fast roll of these slides because there's a lot more detail if you go to the website there, just live6detroit.org. But it took us probably 4 or 5 years of talking with the Kresge Foundation to come up with the idea of what kind of organization we wanted to create for the residents. I'm the chair of the board, but this is no longer a part of the university. It's an independent 501c3. It's run by an executive director. There are 4 staff members now. It's 4 blocks from the university. It's a one-stop shop for people who want to consider either establishing businesses in the area, people who might want to consider living in the area, or people who have ideas that they want to share with individuals from that community. There's another well-known organization in Philadelphia by the name of Live 6, not Live 6, but U3 Advisors, used to be U3 Ventures, and they did a lot of the spade work for the development of Midtown, and they did the same thing for the university. in terms of trying to find out what could be a reasonable plan in order to improve that area. So as I say, you get lucky sometimes. So I got lucky by having the the Kresge Foundation support all of this. I've never seen one invoice for all of the consulting work that they have provided to the university in order to get this organization started. The university makes a contribution of $100,000 a year, which is a lot of money for us to contribute, but we had to be a part of this initiative and not let the foundation be the only one that it was actually contributing to it. So the Kresge Foundation really supports us to the tune of $1 million to $1.5 million a year in order for this organization to work. But the organization is really working on behalf of the city and has also helped fund some of the initiatives of the city planning department too. That's our key goals: real estate development, business attraction and retention, placemaking, residential stabilization, safety, and engagement. 4 of those items: business attraction, retention, placemaking, residential stabilization, and safety, came from the residents and the business owners that live in the area, and that was done as a result of those large-scale interviews of our students and our faculty with people within the area. So we did not make these up. That's what they said were most important to them. They said, we want to stay in our neighborhood. We don't want to see gentrification. But if we're going to stay here, these are essential to enhance and improve the quality of life in the neighborhood. So we have a number of different projects that's going on during the weekdays, also during the summertime. In particular, if you go to the website live6detroit.org, you'll see. And we've been able to bring block clubs together so you don't have too many people squawking about what's not being done. It does happen, and sometimes it happens only by a couple of people. But if most people know that something good is happening, they will readily listen to you. So this is our new home base for Live 6 in Detroit. That's what it looked like before. This was just an old building, and this is what it looks like today. Just dedicated in April. You can see the fine handiwork of our School of Architecture in laying out the design. But the Live 6 staff members are there. Representatives from the city planning department are there. There's another group that's working in the Fitzgerald neighborhood project that they have an office there. And then a couple of members of the DC staff are there too. So another significant financial investment that the Kresge Foundation has made so that we can have that one-stop shop for that. So I'm going to just slip over this, but we have continuation funding. The more things that we are receiving and get really very, very positive attention is really helping that economic development organization move along. We don't have the luxury of having a lot of staff members that I can designate to do these different kinds of things. I spent a lot of time myself, and then gradually brought in other staff members, either from the President's Cabinet or from different offices like the School of Architecture, so that we could plan some of these initiatives. But this has been very important to our success in recruitment, to getting alumni back, also getting more people in the neighborhood involved, because I always hear comments back from the alumni who say, I'm really glad that you all are working in the neighborhood, because we used to live in the neighborhood when we were in school in the 40s and the 50s. And we haven't seen much of that happening within the last 30 or 40 years. So some of these individuals have been major contributors to our campaign in the last few years too. And we're doing a number of things with the College of Business as well too. We've received some grants so that we can really enhance some of our work in this area. So we also have a Center for Social Entrepreneurship. that we established pretty much on the model of Santa Clara. So Father Phil Cook was there at one point, and that's been developed. So this is another one of those hot items that many people are talking about around the country, and the kind of things that also interest alumni, the social entrepreneurship. And many of them would like to be involved in it, or they bring contacts to the university that could be very, very beneficial to the area. And then we have one of our alums who gave us a $3 million gift within the last 6 months to establish a center for responsible investment. Richard Charlton, who started New England Pension Consultants. And Dick was very interested in this. We've had a great 5-6 year conversation about the university, and this is really something that he wanted to do as we developed the proposal to do it. And he really wants to expose young people at a very, very early age about how to invest, and also benefit our students who are coming to the university and link them up with some of the major companies around the country. Sometimes things happen as a result of good conversations. And saw Jeff smiling. I know you know Dick. Yeah. And he's some others of you may know as well too. But one of the reasons why he did that, when we had a little press conference, someone asked him, said, "Well, why did you do something this about responsible investment?" And he said, "Well, as I was coming up the ranks and working in Merrill Lynch and AT&T, he said, I rarely saw a person of color at a senior level in the investment companies that I would work with." And he said what he recognized was the fact that most people did not have the experience at the undergraduate level, and that they really need to be exposed to that at the high school level. And he said, I'd really like to see the university do something in this regard. He's an engineering graduate who spent most of his career in business. So, you get these kinds of interesting situations where an alumnus has a great idea, or you throw out a little idea, and this is what happens to him. So we're very, very happy about that and excited. And then we've got a lot of other things happening within our School of Dentistry, our College of Health Professions, and School of Law. All this is about engagement. So let me stop there rather than bore you with kill you with slides. Yes?
I was wondering, have you used the Alliance to buy or sell property?
Not yet. So here's how we're operating this. Invest Detroit is a CDFI, a Community Development Financial, institution. That's right, so easy, thanks. Invest Detroit has remodeled and really reshaped a lot of neighborhoods. I am now on the board of Invest Detroit, but even before I was on the board, we talked about Invest Detroit coming along through a major fund. There's a neighborhood stabilization fund that has more than $40 million in it. And our neighborhood is one of those neighborhoods that will benefit from that. The other two are the east side of Detroit and the southwest side of Detroit. And their intention is when a property, for example, becomes on the market, gets on the market, they're willing to buy the property and hold it until a prospective business comes along and says, I need space to open up a grocery store or a facility of this particular type. That's pretty much what happened in the Midtown Detroit area near Wayne State. A lot of those run by Sue Mosey, who has been doing this for over 30 some odd years. There were other entities that bought properties, so they were able to dictate what kinds of companies would come in and could use some of these. So you don't want a whole street of bars, or as Sue says sometimes, you don't want, some folks with manicure and all these salons, and And this way you're able to control it. So that's what we plan to do that. So the real estate development part is very important, and we work with Invest Detroit on that. We have some property owners who are holding on to their property because they think that there's going to be a really big payday one day. And so we offer a certain sum for them. We've got some on our main property across the street from the university. And you know, they're holding out, but having another entity being able to purchase some of that property and just, you know, hold it until the right company comes along is what we're hoping to. Yes?
You've shared a lot of innovative initiatives that were part of professional schools, or the professional schools are involved with. As someone who's been Dean of Arts and Sciences before, is something we share in common. I'm interested in hearing innovative ideas that involve colleges of arts and sciences.
Yeah, so, you know, I think of business as being very closely aligned, you know, with the liberal arts. We've had, try to think about, we've had people who have approached us about potential centers, like in areas like the political science area. There's some needs there. I'm trying to think, Debbie or John, within the College of Liberal Arts and Education. We do have alumni in these areas that are willing to support some initiatives, but we really have to develop some of the right programs in order for them, I think, to latch on to it. It's very easy to do things for law and for dentistry, for architecture, like you say, but we don't have any music programs, for example, but that would be, you know, one area in which we could do some things. In the College of Arts and Sciences, there's a lot of service that goes on. We have a leadership leadership institute. A lot of that has been funded through a variety of companies as well as alumni, so we can get them to be very, very involved in that. In English, for example, we have one of our professors who's doing a lot of things on literacy with some of the students. There's a professor in English also who approached us last year, actually after the leadership seminar, who, when we were telling him about the development of the home base, he said, you know, there are a lot of people within the neighborhood in some of the blocks who really don't have the proficiency in literacy that they might be comfortable with. So his proposal is to use the honors students in his college in order to teach some of the individuals in the community through literacy programs. So, pardon me?
The theater program that tries to put forth programs that are that focus on social types of problems. So they're very active. We do not have a theater directly on our campus, so we use a theater at the YMCA in the downtown area, but they're very socially conscious productions that include not only our students but also residential actors, and you know, it's real interesting. We're not putting on My Fair Lady or, you know, things like that. They're very interesting productions.
And some of our alumni, and some of our alumni, like in theater, for example, like Keegan Michael Key, for example, he has a separate program of his own called 313, and he's been working with young people through his program to get them interested in acting and theater. So there are lots of linkages that are being developed as we engage the alumni in some of these different things too. So, but thanks for mentioning. John?
It's worthwhile noting that 25 for us is we have 32% first-gen students, and we have about 30% STEM discipline minority students. A couple of major programs there. First-gen one is we have a whole bunch of those first-gen students who've done 2 to 3 minute profiles on a website saying, here's how hard it was to learn how to learn, that kind of thing. First gen is in many of our schools. I like it that 32% of our students are first gen.
Yeah.
We put a lot of effort into the gathering places for them to make them welcome.
So the civic and community engagement for us is really important. It's very, very important to me because people do compliment the university on being an anchor institution, and they use the term much more than we use it. When Mercy College existed, Mercy College was just 3 miles away from where the McNichols campus, our main campus, is located. So people attribute the Jesuits and the Sisters of Mercy as being 2 institutions that were very much a part of the heart of the city and that never left. And we're able, at least, to continue doing a lot of those things. So even as we talk about other things that we do, the students in the College of Business Administration and others, economics, which is in arts and sciences, for example, they provide assistance to people with the tax, with their taxes during the year. If you come to our library at any given time during the daytime, you will see many of the neighbors who don't have access to computers or also to Wi-Fi at our rates there. People come and they spend time on our track on a daily basis, and so we really work hard at inviting people and reminding people that they're invited into the university. And I would say we have far more activities going on now in the evenings for meetings and the like than we did many years ago. So that making people feel like they are a part of the university community becomes very, very important for us, and that's one of the reasons why we're getting some of the financial support in order to make some of these things happen. So
We even give a couple scholarships too. We have 2 full tuition scholarships that we give to residents who are within the zip codes of our university.
yeah. So a couple of the neighborhoods that are directly around, the neighborhood directly across the street, the Fitzgerald neighborhood, at one time back in the 50s was a heavily Jewish neighborhood that became African American. The average income of individuals in that neighborhood is probably under $25,000. It's very low. And then there's a neighborhood just to the south of the campus that equally has the same, the same kind of average income for their families. And then we've got a lot of elderly individuals who've been living around the neighborhood for many, many years too. So our students do something with Campus Kitchen, for example, on the weekends and during the weekdays. And then those scholarships that Debbie just mentioned are awarded to students who are from that particular area. So some of that we had to really reach out and engage individuals because we weren't getting the applications from the neighborhood because there really had been a break between the communications between the university and the community. And I don't have relatives everywhere, but I do have relatives in Detroit that I really didn't know nearly as well. My relatives are in the 80s, and a couple of my relatives lived around the university. So when I was meeting with some of the individuals in the community within my first several months, one of the ladies who just passed away last year, she was 96 years old, and she was in her late 80s, and I mentioned the last name of my relatives, and she knew her very, very well. And my aunt, I call her my aunt because she's like my aunt, my cousin said, well, whatever they're telling you about what the university supposedly used to do is not true. And she would tell me the exact thing that the university did. So, our engagement really has been strengthened with that. But that's an area for us to talk really on behalf of the city because the people who are across the street really are voiceless. I mean, they are not given the same kind of attention as some of the other 4 neighborhoods that are in the immediate vicinity of the area. So we've got the Detroit Golf Club area, we've got Palmer Woods, which is where I live, a bunch of old mansions from the 20s and the like, and then you've got these other neighborhoods where it's hard for people just to get their alleyways cleared on an annual basis, and that's one of the service projects for all of our first-year students every year. and it is one that is really appreciated by so many. My final words are, I'll thank all of you who sent students last week to the National Jesuit Student Leadership Conference that our students coordinated and took the lead on this year. We had about 250 students from the pretty close to all of the Jesuit universities in town, and they were really engaged. So when you get back to campus, and when they come back to campus, you'll hear about some of the service projects that they did, and the delegations got a chance to really see Detroit up close and personal from last Wednesday all the way through Sunday. So I'd be really interested in hearing back from you what the students had to say about their experiences in Detroit, because most of them were in Detroit for the first time ever in their lives. And once again, that's one of the benefits, that we have as a network of institutions, that we can share our students and those opportunities with them. Yes?
These are so many different examples happening in different schools or colleges or places. I'm wondering, as a university, do you have a comprehensive strategic plan or an office of community engagement or like a portal for community and campus folks to get together and decide, we are interested in this and we can provide this?
We've done a much better job of listing all of the different opportunities that we do provide, which is one of the reasons why that community and economic impact document we put together, and have been doing that on an annual basis. But I'm so glad you asked that question about the strategic plan, because the co-chair of our recently approved strategic plan is right here in our midst, Debbie Stiefel. You want to say just a couple of words? We have a couple of minutes here.
Engagement is the key, and I have a co-chair who is the dean of our architecture school, and we spent the last year and a half meeting with over 500 community members in all campuses to ask them where they saw the university, where did they want to see the university. And they were very rich conversations and visioning exercises, and it was really, we didn't know what we were going to get when we started meeting with folks, but just the idea that it was so inclusive, where people had felt that they got to contribute to the conversation about where the university was going. And we thought we were going to get a million different things from people, but basically what happened was about 7 or 8 themes of where people were coalescing around, that we were able to develop a very focused strategic plan. We don't have 150 goals in the strategic plan. We have 3 that came directly from our community, and it was very exciting. We met with students, faculty, staff, students. Took a long time to bring all of this together because we listened, we read a lot of research. I'm very data oriented, for those of you who don't know me very well. And so I made them read all of the current surveys and the Higher Learning Commission's report, the Jesuit Examine, all of any kind of research that we had, we just shared writ large so that people, couldn't say, well, I didn't know. They knew, everybody knows everything. And we developed it, had a great team, and then volunteers who, for each of those 3 goals. So our whole working team probably had about 60 people on it, which is pretty large for trying to bring all of those entities together, but we did it, and we're ready for implementation now. It was very exciting. I learned a lot about the institution. I got to meet more people at the school, and even though it was like taking a second job, it was very rewarding, just because I feel that, especially under Dr. Garibaldi's leadership, that, I'm thankful that he allowed me to do that, because I still had to do my day job. This one was between midnight and 3 a.m.
So we'll send it to you if you're interested in it. And Debbie and the other co-chair was Will Wittick, who is he's back to faculty rank, but our Dean of Architecture. So we had a lot of engagement in it, which was really great. So last words, at the end of the opening of Live 6 Alliance, the dedication ceremonies, we asked people to respond to the question, we can possibly impact our community if. And the School of Architecture came up with that line, and it's something that they do in lots of communities. And people wrote a variety of their comments on that large post board, which we have in our home base offices, and also which we've shared with others. But those are members of the community. And you know, we all make a difference as Jesuit universities, and in this particular case, this is really a focus very, very strongly on our neighborhood. So, thanks very much.